Hello, everyone. Just give us a few minutes to get prepped in the kitchen, and we'll begin shortly.
Okay, so I can go ahead and get started while the kitchen is connecting. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, and thank you so much for joining us. See if I can do the slides. No, it's not letting me. Oh, there it goes. All right. So my name is Diana Guevara, and I am a community health education specialist with the Nourish Program at UT Health Houston School of Public Health. The Nourish Program shows people how to grow, prepare, and promote food that encourages lifelong health and well-being through hands-on, evidence-based classes taught across our garden, kitchen, clinic, and community. So next slide. There we go. Today's webinar is hosted by the Michael and Susan Dell Center for Healthy Living at the UT Health Houston School of Public Health. The center's vision is healthy children in a healthy world, with a mission to advance health and healthy living for children and families through early and impactful interventions. So thank you so much for the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation for providing funds to the center to host today's webinar. So we've got some questions. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you do have questions throughout the presentation, just be sure to pop those in the Q&A section. All right, so with that, I'm excited to introduce our speakers, Dr. Rupa Mahadevan, Melissa Dano, and Dolores Woods, who will be talking about how food connects us all, the theme of this year's National Nutrition Month. Dr. Mahadevan completed her pediatric residency in Chicago at Advocate Children's Hospital and went on to complete a fellowship in integrative medicine at the Northwestern University Osher Center and the University of Arizona Center for Integrative Medicine. She practiced general pediatrics at Lurie Primary Care prior to joining the pediatric faculty at Louisiana State University, or LSU. She then completed a one-year program in integrative oncology and was co-director of the Cancer Survivorship and Lifestyle Medicine Clinic at LSU for 4 years, where she also taught culinary medicine. She has practiced pediatrics for more than 8 years and is also trained in shared medical visits, nutrition and clinical hypnosis, and mind-body medicine. She is boarded in the pediatrics and integrative medicine and joined UT Health Houston in May 2024, where she has a joint position in the UT Health Houston Department of Pediatrics Community Division and the UT Health Houston School of Public Health to help drive our culinary medicine program. Melissa Danho is the interim dietetic internship director at UT Health Houston School of Public Health in Houston. She is a registered dietitian nutritionist with experience in individual and group nutrition counseling and education, program and curriculum development, and program implementation in the area of maternal and child health. Her professional interests include creating access points to nutritious foods, nutrition education, and counseling through non-medical drivers of health. She believes in the importance of creating nutrition security and developing stress management strategies to empower communities and individuals to help prevent and mitigate the effects of illness and improve overall well-being. When not working, Ms. Danho enjoys spending time with her family, cooking, and shopping for interesting earrings, which I love to enjoy whenever I see her here. And Dolores Woods is the Director of Culinary Nutrition for the Nourish Program at the Michael and Susan Dell Center for Healthy Living at the University of Texas UT Health Houston School of Public Health. After completing her undergraduate education at UC Riverside, she moved to New York City to attend culinary school and received a Grand Diplôme in Culinary Arts from the French Culinary Institute. She has worked in the restaurant industry and taught cooking classes for several years. Her interest in food, cooking, and sustainability led her to complete a master's degree in food studies from New York University. Later, she attended the Coordinated Dietetics program at California State University, Los Angeles, to become a registered dietitian. She has worked in the field of culinary arts, nutrition education, and university food service. She is bilingual in both English and Spanish, and Ms. Woods is enthusiastic about teaching others about nutrition and working toward healthy lifestyles. So I'll now hand it over to Melissa and Dolores and Rupa with their presentation on family meals, cooking, connection, and culture.
All right, welcome everyone. I'm so excited to be here. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. So when we think about the objectives for our presentation today, we really want to talk about why do family meals matter? How does it support our children and families? What is the relationship between dietary food patterns, nutritious eaters, and of course, building healthy habits over time, especially when it comes to well-balanced meals? And of course, ending with practical tips of incorporating culture, community, mindful eating into shared family mealtime. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with our first slide. So the importance of shared meal times. So according to a meta-analysis by Hammonds and Flees, we know that children and adolescents who share 3 or more meal times per week with their family are more likely to be of normal weight range, have healthier dietary patterns of eating compared to those children that eat fewer meal times per week. So these children are also less likely to engage in disordered eating patterns. And as a pediatrician, anecdotally, I can tell you there are so many times parents have approached me saying that they found out something about their child during a shared family meal. In my adolescent clinic, I do see a lot of bulimia and anorexia, and probably over the last 8 years, at least 10 families have mentioned that they picked up on the disordered eating behavior during a shared family meal. And that's when they reached out to their pediatrician. With that being said, I've also had numerous positive cases of families telling me they picked up a stutter during mealtime and then were able to immediately connect their child with a speech therapist. They found out their child loves theater and then enrolled them in a theater program over summer. So it's just such a beautiful time to think about the importance of shared meal times. And when we look at the systematic review by Amaro, he found that what supports family meal times, again, the higher frequency, 3 times a week, is associated with healthier food consumption. And this goes across young adults and adolescents. And so the increased frequency leads to increased healthier food consumption. And when we think about children, we know that over time, children that are eating family meals and having more shared behaviors and of parents and caregivers are more likely to pick up those healthier eating habits. Next slide. So when we think about the promotion of healthier eating habits, Walton found that more frequent family dinners are associated directly with higher consumption of fruits and vegetables over time and lower intake of fast food, sugar-sweetened beverages, as well as unhealthier food products among young adults and adolescents. And this was regardless of family functioning. So this was regardless if parents were separated in different households, if they were eating at a relative's house, as long as there was a shared family meal, there was healthier food consumption across the board. So what the data is really driving us is showing us the more frequent our children are eating together, the healthier options that they're finding over time. And I think the big reason as to why is we know that parents model good behavior and healthier eating habits, children are more likely to follow. They're more likely to control their portion sizes. They're more likely to introduce a variety of foods in a different ways, feel less rushed during those meal times to have an opportunity to mindfully eat those foods. And the most important thing the study found was the positive environment that was created during the shared meals. So it wasn't just the modeling actually of caregivers. What they found is that the modeling of older siblings made such a difference in the younger children's consumption of certain food patterns. And so, what we found through this study is that consistency is key. And when I anecdotally ask my families again and again, what are they cooking at meal times? How are they bringing the families together? And when the more questions I asked, the more I found most families are cooking a vegetable, a protein, and a whole grain and getting the children involved during these meal times. And so the evidence really drives us to believe that the positive environment around shared family meals consistently shows this improved, healthier eating pattern of children and adolescents. Next slide. What I really took away from this next study by Utter and Berger was that it wasn't just the improvement in children that the studies were finding. The parents and caregivers were also showing just as much improvement in their lower levels of stress and their lower levels of depression. So family meals over time is a shared source of comfort and security across the board in all members of the family. And in a world where stress and technology distractions are constant, sharing a meal really offered a time for connection and relaxation. It helped children feel valued and supported. And the research really suggested that regular family meals reduce behavioral problems in children over time, reduce the use of substance abuse, reduce mental health issues, and a big part was the daily check-in in parents and kids. And I thought this was really beautiful that came out was I think my initial assumption was to think that just children were improved in their well-being, seeing that caregivers were significantly improved in their well-being with the statistical analysis was really heartening to me as well. Next slide. And so when we think about the improvement in family and children's stress and well-being, we have to go back to parents who frequently share family meals report higher levels of family functioning. And I think that correlates back to the levels of stress and depression. Because when we see the higher levels of family functioning is directly correlated to everyone's improved self-esteem and reduce levels of anxiety and stress. And then one great thing that came out of the study by Harrison and White was that there was better academic performance and lower risk-taking behaviors in children and adolescents alike. And we think about children, why is this so? And it didn't go as much into the why as as I had initially thought that the study would, it just correlated the behaviors. And when I started digging and digging into the research and kind of fine tuning the why, I found that children, when they take part in a family meal, they're usually also taking part in chores. So they're setting the table, they're washing the dishes, and they become a valued member of the group. And that in turn leads to improved self-confidence and improved self-efficacy over time. And as a pediatrician, I really had to go back and think about, how can we foster an environment with family meals that improve over time? And when we think about the why, I actually went back to the Ericksonian stages of development, which was one of the first things we learn as pediatricians, is we learn to understand where are children in their stages of development at different points of their life. And it went back to beautiful research by Gabor Mate, and it talked about in stage one, we're at the attachment phase. in childhood. At stage 2, we're at the autonomy phase in childhood. At stage 3, we're at the initiative stage. Stage 4, which is when we're entering adolescence, we're at the building confidence phase. And finally, as we get into the stage 5, as a young adult, we're in the identity. Who am I? And when family bonds are strong, adolescents spend more time at home. When family bonds are strong, then we know that the values at home that they're cultivating is something that's permeating the rest of their values at school and in sports. And so doing chores earlier in life, such as setting the table, washing dishes, was correlated with better work habits down the line into adulthood. So these children that instilled good work habits during early on in life, especially with doing chores related to the kitchen, they've been shown to predict better academic success and better educational attainment 20 years later. So that showed us that mastering a chore gives kids a sense of accomplishment, and then those tangible results of their effort boost their self-efficacy, and it all goes back to their belief system of succeeding at something. And I thought that was so beautiful to really bring it back full circle of the why. And so next slide. When we think about strengthening family bonds, we know that family meals really provide a unique opportunity for enhancing family relationships, fostering better communication, and most importantly, creating a supportive environment that buffers against stress and conflict. So on days that adolescents did find a shared meal with caregivers in the house, they actually reported better fulfillment and better happiness in the study with Armstrong and Telzer. And the caregivers reported less burnout and stress. And what was so interesting was that family conflict was associated only on the days that there was not a shared meal in the family. So sharing a meal is really a beautiful way to enhance communication. And this is the last slide I will share. Next slide. So what we know is that family and caregivers, they're just more satisfied with life. When we eat together, we share together, we cook together, we learn from one another, and really gives us an opportunity to check in and catch up. I'm reading right now the autobiography of Caroline Witten, who's actually the founder of Spanx. And she said that family meals was the greatest asset that allowed her to become a leader and a CEO, because every day at dinner time, her father asked her, "What did you fail at today?" And she said that he wouldn't take nothing for an answer, and that really drove her to learn something new every day and at least try something new, whether that was trying something new at the table or trying something new at life. And I thought that was a great way to end my section and show that, even the big CEOs of today have demonstrated some improvement with a shared family meal.
Thank you so much for that. I think that laid a really good foundation for what we're exploring today. A lot of times when we think about food and nutrition, we may kind of break it down to, how is this nourishing our bodies, or is it healthy? But there are a lot of benefits to family meals, like Dr. Mahadevan was saying, that really expand beyond just nutrition. It includes nutrition, but it goes way beyond that, which I think is fantastic. So another thing that we can think about and talk about are creating traditions and rituals, right? So food traditions don't only have to do with birthdays or holidays, even though we cherish those greatly, right? But we can really kind of break that down into more regular family meals and creating smaller traditions. So we may have a large, more involved traditions during the holidays, but if we decide we're going to have Friday night dinner together, we can establish traditions and rituals around that, or Wednesday night or Sunday, whenever. And that can really give us that sense of continuity and stability in the family. A lot of times we think about children and their need for that stability, but creating that stability for ourselves can also help us to reduce anxiety, right? And it can be something really simple. So it can be something like lighting a candle or dimming the lights, right? Giving ourselves a signal. I love mood lighting, right? When we go out to dinner and they have the little candle on the table, right? They're kind of setting an environment. And we can do that for ourselves as well. You can play a bell or a chime sound. It could be a fun old-timey dinner bell, or it could be something soothing and relaxing. You can set dinner music. So that's something that I've actually done. I'm the kind of person who loves to do playlists. So you can do a certain playlist, or even if you go on Spotify, I went up to try to find something different, and I put in dinner music, and there were all kinds of playlists up there. There's like breakfast jams, there's different types of things, so you can really kind of have fun exploring that, and setting kind of a different mood or setting a specific tradition, right? You can let your kids pick something out, just to kind of make it. Another great thing that we can do during family meals is develop those life skills, right? So we were talking about the stages of development and different things that we can learn. But there's lots of skills. There's time management skills, right? If we're thinking about cooking, you could use math or measurement. So our kids can kind of practice that. If you're following a recipe, do we need to double this? Do we need to put it in half? How would we do that, right? We can kind of talk about that with our family members and with our kids if we're involving them in that creation of the meal. As they get older, if they want to come with us, talking about budgeting and grocery shopping, right? Grocery shopping is a skill, y'all. I go in with a strategy. If you do some meal planning first, that can really help you to direct what it is you're going to get at the grocery store, so you don't just fall into all the end traps that they have. And showing that to your children or having them help you plan or pick out some of the produce can really get them engaged in that and help them create those really important skills, especially as they get older, go off to college, or live on their own. It is so easy just to DoorDash nowadays, but that also dashes your money out of the door. So I think this is a way to really help, develop those skills in our children and for us to be a little bit more mindful as well. Another wonderful thing that we could do with family meals and by eating together is encourage mindful eating, right? If we're eating together, we're generally more focused on the food. We all know that if we sit in front of the TV or a movie, that bowl, bag, or box of popcorn can just disappear, and I don't know where it went, because we're not being mindful. But when we're sitting down and really being intentional and eating together, that allows us to focus on the company and to really focus on the meal and to really focus on that flavor. So you're getting it in your taste buds. You're really enjoying it, you're thinking about it, you're feeling the textures, you're really tasting the flavor. And by eating together, we're also kind of slowing down, right? So we tend to not eat as fast when we're eating with our family members, in part because we're talking. And that can also help us put us more in touch with our fullness cues. Again, when we're eating mindlessly, it's really easy to just eat quickly and overdo it and feel overstuffed and uncomfortable afterward. But if we're taking our time, if we're talking with our family members, if we're asking questions, if we're being curious, that's going to give our bodies more time or our brains more time to get the signal that we're full, so that we're not doing that overeating so easily, right? Because we're sharing that meal and we're being more mindful and we're enjoying the meal. Another great thing that we can do is create a routine. So obviously we're all super busy, but if we take the time to do some planning for family meals, we can create a routine related to the family meals. A lot of times we're busy running around, and that may lead to skipping meals. It may lead to eating out more. But if we're taking time to create a routine, that can really be helpful. And it doesn't have to be always dinner at home at the table, right? If we know that we're going to be busy, maybe we want to prepare something in advance. Maybe if we're going to be running around or going to a game and we know we're going to be hungry after lunch or be hungry afterward, we can pack some snacks. I love making like little egg cups in muffin tins, and you can fill them with different kinds of veggies. And it's great. It's a great on the go kind of meal or snack. We could maybe do a picnic afterward. Again, with a little bit of thought and a little bit of planning, we can create a routine so that we're sharing food together and we're really enjoying it. So again, it can really be grounding for kids. It can help us and provide that comfort, that stability, that predictability. If we know, you know what, every Friday, every Sunday, we're doing this. Every Saturday, we're having this fun lunch. Reducing technology and distractions. So we all are addicted to our phones to one degree or another, right? Or we've got that 90-inch screen that we're just in awe of at home. But it'll be more special. You could be more in awe of it if it's off a little bit more. And if we're having some face-to-face time, right? So again, really being intentional when we're doing these meals, taking our phones, putting them to the side and not having them like right next to your fork and your knife, maybe, putting it in a separate room or putting it on a different table or something like that, just so that we can really make sure that we're engaged with each other. And we're having more of those, authentic connections. And we're really kind of in that habit of checking in with each other and conversing with each other. As kids grow, sometimes we have trouble connecting, or they don't want to talk. But having a regular routine, I think, can really help us to establish those connections and have that regular check-in time, instead of somebody just looking up from their screen and asking, what are we doing here, right? We know what we're doing here. We're setting the table, we're setting the mood, we're checking in with each other, we're engaging, and we're having more of those positive interactions and these positive contacts. Another thing that we can do when we're having our family meals is really thinking about building that family heritage, right? It's an opportunity for us to tell stories, of our childhood, or to ask questions about, about each other, or pass on stories from our parents or our grandparents down to our kids. It's a really good place where we can kind of establish that specific family tradition and community. Again, if there are any food customs, we can share that as well. Recipes, if we're cooking, we can share recipes. I know when it comes to my mom and with my grandparents, there was very little writing down. But you know what we can do? I mean, we've all got the cameras in our hands, right? So we can even just video someone, to really kind of get a sense, all right, what is it that they're doing? Or let's document this a little bit. Okay, you won't write it down. Let me find a way to pass on this information so that I have it and I can kind of make it my own, and I may be able to pass that down to my kids as well. We can also draw on our culture, right? So we talked a little bit about, family histories and family stories. We can also really draw on those cultural and family traditions for inspiration when we're trying to think of what to cook or how to cook. And it's a really great way to share memories or, evoke certain positive memories. So I know that there are certain dishes that I associate with eating with my grandparents. There's a certain soup that my grandmother used to make. And sometimes me and my mom will make the soup and I'll say, hey, let's make that soup. Let's make that chicken soup. And when we do it, especially when we do it together, it's kind of calling back that memory of maybe loved ones who we've lost or who we want to honor. And it can really be a beautiful way to share time together. Another thing that we can do when we're thinking about our cooking and our culture, it can be tied to religious practices. So that's a way that we can share that with our children. There's gratitude. A lot of times there's gratitude surrounding food. I don't want to only get thanked on Thanksgiving. You can thank me now. We can thank each other, right? If someone was setting the table, if someone was, ripping up the lettuce or ripping up the cilantro and putting it in, we can thank them, right? We can really feel that gratitude for the meal and express that, right? And again, that's another way that we can be bonding with each other. And you can start your own traditions. If you don't have any set family tradition that's related to food, this is your chance to create that, right? Based on what's available, based on your preferences, based on what you like. Maybe you didn't like the food that you ate growing up. Okay, well, let's change that. Let's make it better. Another thing we want to think about is really examining our cultural beliefs. So sometimes people may have positive or negative feelings associated with their cultural foods, or certain cultures may be perceived as more healthy or more unhealthy. But when we kind of look at the research, it really shows that as immigrants come to this country, and as they become more acculturated in their diet quality tends to decline. So they tend to eat more saturated fats, more sugar, salt, more processed foods. So when we're thinking about our cultural foods, it's really good to think of that not through the lens of is it good or bad or how is it perceived, but are we thinking about consuming whole foods or are we thinking about consuming processed foods? A lot of times, cultural foods are from whole foods, right? They're from beans, they're from legumes, they're from nuts, they're from greens, right? They're from more kind of natural things from whole foods. And if that's part of your culture and part of your history, you don't need to throw it out, right? We can embrace that. We can celebrate that. And we can also, as we're creating our meals, think about, what is it that I can add? Can I add a vegetable to this? How can I make this part of a comprehensive meal so that we're not just avoiding cultural foods for what we perceive as good or as perfect, but that we're really looking to balance our meals. We're looking to see what can we add, especially, and we can always add a veggie, right? What can we add to this to really keep it alive, right? And how can we kind of transform it? It's okay for us to take some of our history and then put our own spin on it. And there are, of course, barriers to having family meals, especially when we think about traditional meals. So sometimes we think, well, I don't have time to make this, or my kids are begging me for pizza and I want to, shut them up. So, what do we do? So one thing that we can do, and Ellen Satter really has a lot of great tips on family meals. One thing we can do is focus on that habit first. So focus on creating the habit so we know, okay, every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday, we're going to have family dinners. Or we're going to have family dinner every Wednesday and Thursday, and we're going to have a nice family breakfast on Saturday, right? So really focusing on creating a routine first, and then you can kind of worry about, all right, well, if I want to make this healthy or how do I want to make this more balanced, etc. So one thing you can do is just focus on creating that habit. Another thing that we can do if we want to introduce these foods to our kids, whether it's a healthy food, a vegetable, or something traditional, is to pair familiar foods with unfamiliar foods, right? So there's something that we're familiar with and that we know that we can eat and enjoy, but also there's something that we can kind of explore, right? Same thing, we can pair preferred foods with a less preferred foods. And another thing that we can do to really encourage family meals and have a positive experience is keep the pressure low, right? We're not force feeding our kids, right? We don't want to have, some of us have really negative memories or food memories about eating with our families. We really want to create a positive environment and an encouraging environment and see and give people time and give our kids time to explore food, to look at it, to smell it, to touch it, maybe spit it out, right? But then we're going to repeat. We're going to try it again. We're not going to say, well, you didn't like this cabbage, so now it's vanished for the rest, of eternity. No, look, it's that cabbage again. Maybe you'll like it this time. Maybe you won't. I'm enjoying it. Your sister's enjoying it. And we're going to kind of keep it. Oops. Another thing that we can do is just kind of start small. Again, is there one specific part of a traditional family meal? If there's something traditional that you want to keep going, it doesn't have to be something that's really, involved or intricate. Is there just a small piece that we can kind of carry forward? Again, we want to involve our kids in creating these meals, right? So they're more likely to eat it and enjoy it. And it doesn't always have to be dinner, right? It can be a breakfast. It can be a lunch. It could be something less pressure, right? Some people feel pressure for dinner. So yeah, let's enjoy a nice Saturday breakfast together. And then another thing we can do is kind of read with our families to reinforce. There are so many great books out there that explore agriculture, that can explore your family's traditions or expose you to new traditions. You can have your kids help you pick something out, maybe that they want to try, or just really learn about food in different ways. And with that being said, I will pass things over to, oh, I'm sorry. We're going to summarize. So what we're going to do is we're going to have our family meals, right? We're going to think about how it can promote that nutritional health, right? More balanced meals, but also that psychosocial health in our kids and adolescents and in ourselves, right? Having those regular family meal times can not only help the kids, but we can really help each other. So whether it's a simple dinner or something more elaborate, having family meals, it can really be a part of a healthy lifestyle. And now we're going to cook.
Erin. Hi, everyone. That was a lot of great information. So now what we're going to do is put it into practice with some really quick, easy recipes. And these are great for the entire family so that you could start these habits. You could bring all of the kids, grandparents, anyone can do these recipes. They're really easy. I'm going to start with some baked chicken nuggets. This recipe comes together really quickly. I already have some ground chicken here. I used the lean ground chicken, and what I'm going to do is just combine some frozen cauliflower rice. So this has been thawed, and it's going to, it's a great way to hide some of those vegetables in our dishes, and it's also going to give this dish a little bit of moisture. I have some ground pepper, some onion powder, some garlic powder and salt that are all in here. And I'm just going to combine them. I am going to use gloves. I like using gloves, especially for these chicken dishes. And if you have, kids that you want helping you with this, using the gloves is a great idea. That way you reduce that risk of the cross-contamination. Sometimes people just don't like touching the sort of raw chicken, if you will. So again, once you have all of these ingredients, they come together really quickly. So the next step here is really just to create those nuggets. What I'm going to do is just with my hands start creating little mounds. And I'm going to bring in my eggs here first. So we're going to do a quick breading. I'm just going to whisk these eggs. You will have these recipes available to you afterwards. We have eggs and some breadcrumbs. And then I also have a sheet pan here that is lined with a wire rack. This is a great way to really add some crispiness to this dish. So what I'm going to do is make these little mounds, dip them in the egg, and then in the breadcrumbs. Anytime you are breading something, the key is trying not to use both hands for the egg and then the breadcrumbs, because then you get a gummy mess. So what I'm going to do is make sure that my right hand is going to be the eggy hand. I'm going to just drop them into the breadcrumbs, and with my left hand, I'm going to make sure I coat them. Otherwise, I don't know if you've ever done this before, it's just a mess, your hands get gummy, and this way you're really just minimizing that. So make sure that it is coated well. These can also be made in the air fryer. Today I am baking them in a 425-degree preheated oven. They're so much healthier than anything you would buy in a restaurant. And that's really the key when we think about cooking meals at home, is that we can control any of the ingredients in these dishes that we make, especially if you do have, family members with some allergies or food intolerances. You could definitely control any of those ingredients. So I'm just going to continue this. The other key here with this recipe is that you want to make sure to spray the top of the nuggets once they are breaded with oil. When we spray it with some cooking oil, that is going to create that sort of really crispy top. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just do a quick spray. I have a bottle here, but if you buy something that already comes in a bottle, that's also a good option. It's really light. You can see that this recipe has minimal oil. Traditionally, you would deep fry them, but obviously we want to avoid that. And they're going to cook really quick. These are going to cook in about 15 minutes. So if you have all of the ingredients ready, you could have a meal in 15 minutes. And I will show you how they look. They're really great meal. You could have a side dish with this. It could be an after-school snack. So we have our really easy baked chicken nuggets. The other thing that we have is broccoli tots. If you've ever had broccoli tots, they sell them in the frozen section, but you can make them and they're very easy. What you do is roast some broccoli. I already have some broccoli here that is roasted. And then you could chop it. So I'm going to just go ahead and do a quick chop here. So just a really quick rough chop. I did not add any oil to this recipe. I just wanted the color on the roasted garlic. So you could see that there's some caramelization in here. I just wanted that nice color so it gives it a nice nutty flavor. And this recipe, it also comes together really quick. So I'm just going to put everything in here. You can flavor it with any kind of cheese. I have some sharp cheddar here. You could use Parmesan. I like using bold cheeses in these types of recipes because you don't have to use as much and they give really bold flavors. I have some seasoned breadcrumbs. I have some Italian seasoning as well. And then some garlic powder in here, just a teaspoon. Some pepper and some salt. And all of this gets mixed. And this is fun for kids because they really like getting their hands dirty. So if you can wear gloves for this as well, especially, if it's you're feeding it to other people. But mix this all together. And then our binding agent is going to be some of this egg. So for little ones, this is something that's really easy. And there is raw egg and if your little ones are helping with this, I would recommend that they use the gloves just so that they're not eating raw egg afterwards. But it's fun for them because then they could sort of smush it and then form little tots here. And then we have a sheet pan here. Oh, and I have some scallions also from our garden. So you could add some onions or some minced onion or some scallions to this if you would like, just for a little bit more flavor. So you could do this. The other thing that I really like is using a mini muffin tin for this because it's so much faster and you don't have to deal with the mess, but it is the fun part. So for a lot of kids, getting them in the kitchen is really the fun aspect of cooking. So, depending on your age group, you could do that. And they create these really great looking tots. So you can see here, they're nice and crispy. They're handheld and again, really easy to do at home. So much healthier than anything that you could buy already pre-made. And I know we're a little short on time, but if you do have any questions about the recipes, please feel free to put them in the Q&A section. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you all so much, Dr. Mahadevan, Melissa and Dolores. We will now answer some questions from our audience that have been submitted.
Yeah, that's what, because they were burning, right?
And then our kitchen, we can still hear y'all. So just a reminder, please be sure to type in your questions in the Q&A box. We do have some from the presentation, but again, if y'all have questions about our recipes, they look delicious. I am hoping to try them soon. So we've got a question. This looks like more for Rupa, but if Melissa and Dolores, y'all want to pop in, you're welcome to. So we had a question asking about, as providers, what we tell your families who might say they're unable to share meals times with family due to social determinants of health factors. Or it doesn't even have to be that, it's more, scheduling. I feel like kids are so busy these days. So things like working late night shifts, or again, the children might be in school and sports and things like that, not having enough time or whatnot to cook nutritious meals. So have you dealt with that, Rupa?
Yes, I know. Most families are on the go. And as a clinician, I know at my household, my husband shifts between night shift and day shift every week. And so, it's a really two-part question. One is, how can you still stay connected despite demands at work and life? And whether that's shift work, I came from Louisiana prior to this, where it was a 90% Medicaid population. Most were single family homes. Parents were working two jobs. And the answer was always the same. So the first part is, we can stay connected now in so many ways. And often it can just, in this part, I usually recommend technology. So if as mom or caregiver is working a late night shift, pop on FaceTime or pop on FaceTime audio if you don't want, your child looking at screens. But just that presence of checking in is so important. Just hearing that voice. How is your day today? How are you doing? And I know we might not all have 30 to 45 minutes, but we all at least have 5 to 10 minutes. And if you're working, late hours, but you're still able to call in, dial in, use Zoom, use different mechanisms, that's so important for that check-in, no matter what time of day, whether you're home or not. And the second part is, a lot of families ask me, how do I eat healthy on the go? We're at soccer practice, then my other daughter has swim practice, then we're running to music class. And I always say, you can pack your meals as well and be on the go. And even if you're sharing a meal in the car, whether you pick something up, whether you're eating a salad from a mason jar, whether you're doing the broccoli tots and chicken nuggets and little Tupperware, even what we found from the data is the communication, the check-in, and just being together was the most important part. And they never quantified it. It wasn't 5 minutes. It wasn't 10 minutes that we know. We just know that 3 meals or more together per week make that difference. I had a family the other day, I told her, why don't, after soccer practice, she's like, it gets too late. By the time we get home, it's 7:30 p.m. and there's just no time for dinner. And so I said, why don't you pack a picnic and just eat? And, the three of you right after practice, or a couple of you right during the practice. And that's what she did. They just packed a picnic and they were able to eat right after. They were still able to share a meal. And she said they had a blast too. So being creative.
Wonderful. Those are really great tips. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I know, it's hard to conceptualize, but having those real world examples are really helpful. Did y'all want to add anything else, or should we go to the next question? We're good? All right. So back to one of the studies, they were wondering if there are any insights into why families didn't share meals, trying to see if maybe those barriers of to not share a meal could help impact what we can do to kind of overcome the barriers.
So when I went through the studies, the biggest barrier was time, because everybody was on a different schedule. And so, going back to, if time is the biggest barrier, although it's an obstacle to circumvent, but what I keep going back to from the last question is none of the studies quantified how many minutes it spends together. They just focused back on the communication and the check-in. So even if time is the biggest barrier, I think we can all share a meal, even if it's 1 or 2 bites in 5 to 10 minutes. And maybe we just share dessert on Wednesday nights, and that's okay too. But the biggest one was everyone on a different schedule.
Yeah, and I think I would add to that, it's also about prioritization, right? A lot of times we tend to prioritize our work, and that's kind of number one, and then everything kind of revolves around that. And work is important, right? Of course. But we can find little pockets of time, whether it's waking up a little bit earlier or putting together something the night before so that we have a meal or a snack or something to share with each other. That can really help, again, for us to create some type of routine. So it's time, sometimes it takes a little bit of planning or a little bit of stepping back. But if we can plan some of these little pockets of time, if we can create opportunities and create, maybe just some time for some small bites and prioritize ourselves, it'll really help to foster some of these positive connections.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's so important. We had another question asking, so many kids are also eating the breakfast, lunch, and snack at schools. Are there any elements of these recommendations that could maybe translate into the school setting, or any recommendations you tend to give out for that kind of school time, lunchtime eating?
What do you think,
Well,
Melissa?
go ahead. Well, I was just going to say that can be really hard to control, right? Because even if we're sending our kids with food, we don't know what happens when they get there. Are they trading it? Are they trashing it? Are they, do they have little bits of cash squirreled away that they're buying snacks? No, we really don't know. But one thing we can do is maybe focus a little bit more on what we can control, and ask questions, right? Oh, how did, what did you have at school today? Or you could just point blank ask them. So did you really eat that, or did you trade it? Or what's the lunchbox looking like when it comes back, right? And you can ask them why. Sometimes kids want to eat what other kids are eating. And if you don't pack them a specific sandwich or whatever, then they might be embarrassed, or everyone else has certain things, and just trying to create some space for these honest conversations and not, passing judgment. Okay, if you're embarrassed about it, instead of like taking it personally, you shouldn't be embarrassed about my food. So, well, what would you like to eat? And we could, maybe come up with some ideas, or you can give them a choice. You have these two things. Of these two things, which would you prefer, right? We're not going to necessarily give everybody carte blanche. But, trying to see what we can control and how we can kind of have a positive influence. If we're having more meals together, is this something that you would like in your lunchbox? Maybe yes, maybe no.
Yeah, I love that recommendation. I feel like the more we've explored conversations surrounding food, I've heard a lot of stories of kids or people, now adults, when they were kids, and their little stories of sharing foods with their friends, or even I have a little story. My mom would send me a sandwich, and my friend would get the chicken nuggets with the mashed potatoes, and I used to dip my sandwich in the mashed potatoes. So like these little things are just so fun to hear from your children, and another way to kind of check in with them and learn their preferences, or anything interesting that you might not know about. Okay, so we have a question regarding any suggestions for a child that might have some texture issues. How can we get them to try different foods if they're a little particular about textures?
Well, I know that there's a book called Food Chaining. So that's something that you can actually kind of look into. And it's about slowly introducing different textures to your child. It could be difficult to switch quickly from one to another. People, kids have their different paces, and they don't go at the pace that we want them to go to, that we want them to go at. So that's one method that I think you could look into. I don't know, Dr. Mahadeo, if you've got some other recommendations.
Yeah, I just had a kid actually in my clinic with similar issues with texture, and we actually ended up doing two things. One is we sent her to a trained speech therapist who was specialized in oral feeding, and she did a lot of different texture introductions. And when I asked her what she did, a lot of it was actually how she prepared the food. So, roasted, steamed, pan fried, and just little amounts gradually, because she said more than it can be texture, that can also be a taste component too. So kind of figuring out the spectrum of where it lies made a big difference. And I know this patient now who I followed up with last week is already eating a lot more things. So really trying to figure out where they are on the spectrum, and then potentially what therapist could help drive improvement.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the flavor component. Just the shape and the way we cut things or cook things can really affect that flavor for people. So just kind of exploring, I think that's a great recommendation. So we have another one that just popped in. We've got a single mom, 2 kids, 14 and 20, living at home, but they refuse to leave their rooms or computer screens when they have meals. So do you have any suggestions on getting, kids to participate when facing resistance? I know right now our screens are taking up a lot of our attention. So any suggestions there?
So, I mean, my suggestion with families, I always say change the Wi-Fi password. Just change it. I say change it daily. I know it's cumbersome, but I think we have to set the tone in some way. And if we want to eat, we eat together. And if you want to go back to your device after dinner or after a nice walk, which we know is lower our, um, sugar load after meals. I think it's just really prioritizing. Going back to what Melissa said, my favorite thing is changing the password, and I know it's worked wonderfully with a lot of our teenagers.
Wow, I've never heard that recommendation, but it's a good one. I love that. All right, wonderful. Okay, so we've got 1 more minute. So we can do, oh no, I lost it. We can do one final kind kind of goodbye and thank you. So thanks everyone for attending today's webinar. The recording, slides, and resources that we mentioned, so that includes the recipes, they will be posted on msdcenter.org, which is the Michael and Susan Dell Center website. Please scan that QR code to register for our upcoming webinar series. So we will be here back again next week. It is a food first approach to cardiometabolic health, sponsored by Avocados Love One Today. So we've got Rupa on that, and I will be doing a little cooking demonstration for that as well. Additionally, the Michael and Susan Dell Center for Healthy Living hopes you'll join us next week on March 27th for a webinar about the status of child health in Texas, results from the Texas SPAN 2021-2023 survey. So thank you all again so much for joining us today, and we will see you hopefully next week, next Tuesday, for our next webinar.